Hello friends, welcome back. First of all, tell me where in the world you're watching my video from. The gate was supposed to open into joy. That was the image Corvin Carter had carried across the Atlantic for 10 long years. The moment he'd rehearsed in silence during overnight shifts in Munich, during lonely winters when snow pressed against his apartment windows, and the only warmth came from photographs of his son taped beside his drafting table. He imagined laughter, surprise, Parker running toward him like he used to when he was small, arms wide, voice cracking with disbelief. Instead, the gate creaked open into something that felt wrong. The air in Austin was thick with late summer heat, heavy and unmoving, as if even the wind refused to participate in what waited beyond. Corvin stepped through the wrought iron entrance and onto the circular brick driveway he'd paid for stone by stone his mind. Every overtime hour converted into red clay and mortar. That driveway was flawless. Too flawless. Not a leaf out of place. Not a crack in the brick. The black Mercedes parked at the center gleamed like a showroom model under the sun. And beside it, a voice cut through the stillness. Faster, Carter. Corvin froze. The name hit him like a slap. Don't miss the rims. The voice continued, sharp and amused. You know what happens if you do. Something in the tone made Corvin's stomach tighten. Not anger. Not volume. Enjoyment. He took another step forward, and then he saw him. Parker was on his knees. Not bending. Not crouching. On his knees, pressed against the hot brick driveway, a bucket of soapy water at his side. His sleeves rolled precisely to the elbow like someone trained not to drip on a polished concrete. He was scrubbing the tire of the Mercedes with methodical intensity. Not the hurried movement of someone helping out. The practiced rhythm of someone who had done this too many times. Corvin's breath left his body without permission. His son, the boy who had graduated top of his class at UT Austin, who had built a tech company from a borrowed laptop and sleepless nights, wore a white uniform shirt tucked sharply into black slacks. Pinned to his chest was a plastic badge. The sunlight struck it at the perfect angle. Parker Carter. House staff. The world tilted. Corvin's mind tried to reject the image the way the body rejects poison. This was impossible. This was a misunderstanding. This was a costume. A joke. A bad coincidence. But Parker's hands told the truth. They were red. Raw. Cracked along the knuckles like skin abused by chemicals and repetition. His movements were quick, not because he was rushed, but because hesitation had consequences. A man stood over him. Early 40s. Expensive watch. Arms folded. The posture of someone accustomed to obedience. He didn't lift a finger to help. He only watched. Corvin stepped behind the oak tree at the edge of the drive, his heart hammering so violently he was afraid it would announce him before he was ready. He hadn't seen his son in 10 years. This was not how reunions were supposed to look. Parker. The name slipped from his mouth before he could stop it. Soft. Broken. But loud enough. Parker's body jerked. Not turned, jerked. Like prey reacting to a sudden sound. He looked up. Their eyes met. For one suspended second, neither of them moved. Then color drained from Parker's face so quickly it was terrifying to witness. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. His gaze dropped instantly, not in shame alone, but in fear. Fear of being seen. Dad. His voice cracked. The man supervising him took a single step back, suddenly fascinated by his phone, retreating with the instinctive cowardice of someone who knew exactly what he'd been doing. Corvin walked forward. Every step felt unreal, like walking through a dream where gravity lagged behind intention. He stood in front of his son, close enough now to smell the chemical cleaner, to see the sweat darkening the uniform collar. "Why are you dressed like this?" Corvin asked. The words came out controlled, but something inside them trembled. Parker's fingers flew to the name tag. He tried to remove it. Fumbled. The clasp wouldn't release. His hands shook too badly to manage the tiny mechanism. The badge remained pinned there, screaming the truth. "You weren't supposed to come yet," Parker whispered. "You said next month." "I came home early," Corvin said. "I wanted to surprise you." The silence that followed felt like punishment. "Corvin Carter, I presume." The voice came from behind him. Smooth. Measured. Dangerous in its calm. Corvin turned. A woman descended the front steps, heels clicking softly against stone. Early 30s. Perfect hair. Designer dress that probably cost more than Corvin's first car. She smiled as if hospitality were a performance. I'm Kimberly, she said, extending a manicured hand. Parker's wife. Corvin took it automatically. Her grip was cold. Lovely to finally meet you, she continued. Parker speaks of you often. The brilliant engineer in Germany. Her eyes slid briefly toward Parker. Something in that glance made him flinch. Just barely. But Corvin saw it. Why is my son wearing a servant's uniform? Corvin asked. Kimberly laughed. Light. Musical. Entirely wrong. Oh, that, she said. He's just helping around the property. You know how men get when they're between things. Between things. The phrase was surgical. She placed her hand on Parker's arm. Not affectionately, but possessively. Go finish the car, honey, she said. The back tire still has streaks. Parker didn't argue. Didn't explain. Didn't look at his father. He dropped back to his knees. And scrubbed. Corvin stood there, rooted in horror, as the home he'd bought with love revealed itself as something else entirely. A stage. A cage. A place where his son no longer stood upright. That night, Parker did not sleep in the master bedroom. He was sent to the back room, the one with no decor. No photographs. No signs that a human life belonged there. Corvin sat on the edge of the narrow bed while his son stared at the ceiling, unmoving. Hours passed. Finally, Parker spoke. You're going to wish you hadn't come, Dad. Corvin swallowed. Tell me, he said softly. And as the house slept, except for the man who wasn't allowed to, the truth began to crawl out of the darkness. Slow, painful, unstoppable. Because this house wasn't built to protect his son. It was built to break him. And Corvin Carter had walked into it without knowing the war had already begun. The room smelled faintly of detergent and exhaustion. Not the clean scent of a well-kept home, but the sterile, overused smell of someone scrubbing the same spaces again and again, trying to erase their own presence. Parker lay flat on the narrow bed, hands folded over his chest, staring at the ceiling like it held answers he no longer believed in. The air conditioner hummed steadily, filling the silence with artificial calm, but nothing about the moment was calm. Corvin waited. He had learned patience in Germany. Long projects, endless diagnostics, machines that refuse to reveal their flaws until you listen long enough. Eventually, Parker spoke. You remember Tech Vision Solutions, right? Corvin nodded slowly. I remember every call, every milestone. A faint smile tugged at Parker's mouth. The ghost of pride. It started in a garage, he said. Just me and two friends. Folding chairs. Whiteboards. A coffee machine that broke every other week. His voice grew steadier as memory took him somewhere safer. We built AI systems for small businesses. Automation. Inventory. Customer flow. Within 2 years, we had 50 employees. Downtown office. Glass walls overlooking the lake. Corvin closed his eyes. He could see it. Could hear the excitement that used to crackle through late-night calls across continents. We were valued at $5 million. Parker continued. Investors were lining up. I thought I'd made it. That everything you sacrificed for me had finally paid off. The word sacrificed hung heavy between them. And Kimberly? Corvin asked. Parker exhaled slowly. She was different then. Supportive. Proud. She brought lunch to the office. Took notes in meetings. Told everyone how brilliant I was. A pause. Her family loved me. Especially her father, Wellington Westfield. Corvin felt something tighten in his chest at the name. He was powerful, Parker said. Real estate. Connections. The kind of man people listened to even when he spoke softly. The shift came subtly. A shadow crossing memory. 6 months after the wedding, Parker continued. He invited me to his study. Told me he had an opportunity. Corvin already knew what was coming. But he let his son speak. 50 acres in South Austin, Parker said. About to be rezoned. Mixed-use development. He had charts. Maps. City council guarantees. His hands curled into fists. He needed family investors. Said outsiders couldn't be trusted. How much? Corvin asked quietly. 1.2 million. The number landed like a gunshot. That was everything, Parker whispered. Company profits. Savings. Credit lines. Everything I'd built. Silence. I should have done due diligence, he admitted. Lawyers. Independent reviews. But it was family. He swallowed. The land was swamp. Zoning had already been denied. The development company didn't exist. Corvin felt rage begin to burn, slow and lethal. They stole it, Parker said. All of it. And when I realized it was gone, moved through shell companies so fast my attorneys couldn't trace it. And the Westfields? Corvin asked. They said they'd been scammed too. A hollow laugh. Funny how their fortune stayed untouched. Parker turned his head toward his father. When Tech Vision collapsed, creditors came. Lawsuits. Press articles calling me reckless. Banks froze accounts. He squeezed his eyes shut. In 6 months, I lost the company, my reputation, my future. Corvin leaned forward. And that's when they offered help. Parker nodded. They said I could stay here, in the house you bought. But there were conditions. His voice dropped. I'd work for the family. The word work tasted wrong. Driver. Cook. Cleaner. Maintenance. Party staff. Each word fell heavier than the last. They made me wear the uniform so guests would know I wasn't family anymore. Corvin's jaw tightened until it hurt. And the name tag. Parker looked away. So I'd never forget who I was. Silence flooded the room. I make breakfast at 5, Parker said. Dinner at 7. Massage Wellington every night while he watches the news. Corvin's breath caught. He calls it arthritis therapy. A pause. They made me sign papers. What papers? Corvin asked sharply. Personal guarantees, Parker whispered. For their companies. Loans in my name. If I leave, I owe everything. He turned to his father then. Truly turned. Eyes filled not with tears, but with resignation. They didn't shame me, Dad. They didn't have to. Corvin felt something break inside his chest. This wasn't weakness. This was entrapment. Slow. Calculated. Legal looking. A cage made of paper and shame. I thought if I endured long enough, Parker said, maybe they'd let me go. His voice cracked. They never planned to. Corvin stood. Not suddenly. Not violently. But with the calm of a man whose life had just been redefined. They turned my son into property, he said. Parker looked up, startled by the steel in his father's voice. And I don't care how powerful they think they are. Corvin continued softly. No one owns my child. For the first time in 2 years. Parker felt hope. And fear. Because hope, once reborn, makes tyrants dangerous. And somewhere in the house above them, the people who believed they owned everything slept peacefully, unaware that the man who built engines meant to survive disasters had just begun dismantling theirs. Corvin did not sleep. He lay on the narrow guest mattress in the back room, staring into darkness while the house whispered around him. Pipes clicking, wood settling, distant air vents breathing like something alive. Every sound felt watched. Every shadow felt intentional. By morning, he understood something with brutal clarity. Whatever had happened to his son was not chaos. It was design, and design always leaves patterns. At dawn, while Parker prepared breakfast upstairs, because that was still expected of him, Corvin left the house quietly and drove into the city. The Austin Public Library opened early. It smelled of paper, dust, and order, a sanctuary for a mind that needed structure. He claimed a corner workstation and began the way he always did when faced with a broken system. From the outside, Wellington Westfield. The name alone pulled up pages of prestige. Real estate mogul. Philanthropist. Donor plaques. Awards. But Corvin wasn't looking for headlines. He was looking for seams. Property filings. Corporate registrations. LLC records. And there they were. One company. Then another. Then another. Different names. Same mailing address. Same registered agent. Same handwriting style on digital forms. 18 shell companies. Each small enough to avoid attention. Together, a web. As he traced timelines, a pattern emerged. Loans taken out just months before Parker's collapse. Loans defaulted shortly after. And every single one listed the same personal guarantor. Parker Carter. Corvin's chest tightened. Someone pulled up a chair beside him. Are you Corvin Carter? He turned. An elderly woman stood there with kind eyes and silver hair pulled into a bun. Yes. I'm Helen Anderson, she said. I live 2 houses down from your son. Her hands trembled slightly as she sat. I've been hoping you'd come. Corvin listened as she spoke. How she watched Parker change. How the suits disappeared. How the uniform appeared. How every morning at 6 he washed cars like clockwork. She opened a small notebook. Dates. Times. Observations. 2 years' worth. I was a librarian for 35 years, Helen said quietly. I know when something doesn't belong on the shelf. She leaned closer. And Mr. Carter, that family isn't just cruel. She lowered her voice. They're dangerous. Over coffee later, she showed him everything she'd uncovered. Debt totals. Forged guarantees. A total number that made his stomach turn. $2.3 million. All in Parker's name. They didn't ruin him accidentally, Helen said. They buried him on purpose. That afternoon, Corvin sat in a glass-walled law office overlooking the Texas Capitol. Caroline Whitmore listened without interruption. When he finished, she exhaled slowly. What your son experienced is labor trafficking, she said. The word hit harder than violence ever could. They use debt to force unpaid labor. Isolation. Psychological coercion. She met his eyes. It's federal. Hope ignited. Sharp and dangerous. We can stop them, Corvin asked. Yes, Caroline said. But understand this. Families like the Westfields don't collapse quietly. She opened a file. 3 previous victims. A contractor ruined. An accountant framed. A city planner dead. Caroline's voice was steady. They don't threaten unless they're willing to follow through. That evening, Corvin stood in the driveway again, watching Parker wash the same Mercedes. But this time, he didn't feel helpless. He felt furious, because now he understood. This wasn't about money. This was about power. And power panics when it's exposed. Tomorrow, they would confront the Westfields. And nothing, not wealth, not reputation, not fear, would ever make Corvin Carter look away again. Because the truth had surfaced. And truth, once seen, cannot be unseen. The Westfield estate sat high above the city, its gates curving inward like arms that welcomed only those already chosen. Old money lived differently. It didn't shout wealth, it assumed it. Marble beneath every footstep. Oil portraits watching from the walls. Silence thick with entitlement. Corvin felt at the moment he stepped inside. This was not a home. It was a fortress built to remind others who mattered. Wellington Westfield waited in his study behind a desk carved from a single slab of dark wood. He did not stand when they entered. Men like him never did. I understand you have concerns about your son, he said mildly. Concern. As if Parker were a scheduling inconvenience. Caroline placed her briefcase on the desk and opened it with surgical calm. What you've done, she said, constitutes fraud, debt bondage, and federal human trafficking. Documents slid across the polished surface. Shell companies. Loan trails. Guarantees. The color drained from Wellington's face, just for a second. Then it hardened. My family has built this city, he said. Your papers mean nothing. The door opened behind them. Maximilian Westfield entered. The air changed instantly. Violence didn't need to speak. It announced itself through posture. His eyes found Corvin and stayed there. You're making a mistake, he said. Caroline didn't blink. We're offering a settlement, she said. Release Parker. Restore ownership. Pay damages. Wellington laughed. $3.5 million, he scoffed. For a man who couldn't manage his own life. Maximilian stepped closer. You have 48 hours, Wellington said coldly. After that, you'll lose everything. He leaned forward, just like your son did. As they left, Corvin felt it, the shift. The moment power realized it was being challenged. That night, Parker underwent psychological evaluation. PTSD, clinical depression, learned helplessness, torture, the doctor said quietly, and warned them. The most dangerous time, she said, is when victims try to leave. The storm came after. Rain hammered the highway as Corvin drove back alone. Then he noticed the truck. Too steady, too deliberate. When it lunged, training took over. The collision lit the night like lightning. The truck exploded against concrete. Corvin survived. The message was clear. At home, Parker waited behind barricaded furniture. They know, he whispered. They said midnight. The house went dark as thunder split the sky. Glass shattered. A voice echoed inside. Maximilian. The smell of gasoline crept under the door. When a match struck, time fractured. Flames devoured the hallway. Smoke swallowed breath. Corvin charged. The crowbar fell. Pain tore through his shoulder. And then Parker moved. Not the servant. Not the broken man. The son. The beam collapsed. Fire roared. They escaped into rain as the house burned behind them, and Maximilian with it. Somewhere in the chaos, sirens wailed. But the war was over. Because power had revealed its final truth. When it cannot control, it destroys. And in doing so, it condemns itself. 6 months later, the air outside the Travis County Courthouse felt unreal. Too clean, too bright. Sunlight poured across the stone steps where reporters clustered like birds waiting for scraps of history. Microphones pointed forward. Cameras blinked red. Inside, justice had already spoken. Corvin stood slightly behind Caroline Whitmore as she addressed the press. Not because he wanted distance, but because he finally understood something that had taken a lifetime to learn. This moment was never about him. The jury's verdict sends a message, Caroline said, her voice steady and unshaking. Wealth does not excuse human trafficking. Power does not place anyone above the law. Behind the glass doors, Wellington Westfield emerged in an orange jumpsuit. No tailored suit. No inherited authority. Just a man. Handcuffed. Shrunken. His eyes searched the crowd desperately. Not for mercy, but for recognition that never came. 15 years. Federal. No parole. Every shell company dissolved. Every property seized. The empire that had crushed others for decades collapsed under the weight of its own arrogance. Corvin didn't feel triumph. He felt release. Later that afternoon, he sat beside Parker on a quiet bench beneath a live oak tree across from the courthouse. The same son who once washed cars on his knees now sat upright, shoulders squared, eyes clear. Healing hadn't been easy. Nightmares still came. Certain smells still froze his breath. But therapy had begun stitching him back together. Not into who he was. Into someone stronger. I didn't think I'd ever feel normal again, Parker said softly. Corvin shook his head. You don't go back, he replied. You move forward. Carter Technologies opened 3 months later. Small. Intentional. Built not on ambition, but purpose. Guardian, an AI platform designed to detect patterns of human trafficking, shell company laundering, and debt-based coercion. The irony was quiet and powerful. The same intelligence once used to destroy him now protected others. At the launch event, Parker stood before a modest crowd. He didn't wear a suit. He didn't need one. We built this, he said, because silence is what keeps monsters alive. Corvin watched from the back, pride swelling not from success, but from survival. He had returned from Germany, believing he was bringing a gift. Instead, he had been brought home because he was needed. Some journeys don't begin with choice. They begin with timing. Looking back, Corvin understood how close he'd come to losing everything that mattered. Not to fire, or violence, or wealth, but to absence. Success had nearly cost him his son, and presence had saved him. That was the lesson the Westfields never understood. Money builds walls. Love breaks them. And when the fire is gone, what survives is not the house, not the fortune, not the name. What survives is the bond no power on earth can own. Father and son, standing together, unbroken.